All right, I'm going to start up then. Just a couple things before we get going. The first is, if you look on here, so this is what I'm going to have to be doing as soon as possible. A couple people have asked, yeah, I would like your Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 homework and labs. Just for this chapter, or these two chapters, again, if you would zip it, put it in a folder, zip it, and send it to me as soon as you can, that would be great. Then I'm going to start grading these, and that'll be the ones that you see right here. I've also opened up the chapters 3 and 4. All right. This morning, I emailed you a couple files, and one of them has got a PDF in it, and that will be the labs that we'll be doing for chapters 3 through 14 in the book. All right. And I will be giving you homework in addition to that, every time we get into the chapters. So that's this stuff. All right. If we go down further, you'll notice Chapter 1 written test, Chapter 2 written test, Chapter 1 and 2 hands-on. Everybody did fine, and everybody's got 100 for the Chapter 1 and 2 written tests. You just turned in the Chapter 13. And the only reason I'm showing you that is this is what I do, and then you're able to go into Gradebook and see everything for you. All right? This is also where I take attendance, in case you cared. So every morning I'm supposed to come in here. John let me know he's having car trouble. But again, you're either here or you're not here. All right? So that's how I have to do that every day. And if they don't get it in by the end of the day, then I get a nasty email sent to me asking me why it wasn't put in there. So they want us to literally send those out as close to 8:05 as we possibly can. All right. Now, for it's Chapter 1. Like, what are we doing Chapter 1? Because I did not do this with you, I thought it might be a good idea to go over the summary. A couple people have asked, hey, I'm still struggling a bit with this. I'm still struggling a bit with this. That's to be expected. All right? Maybe you're good enough that you can sit there and absorb 100% of the material in both those chapters. All right? And be able to use those right away. To me, it's a learning process where you keep building with every chapter on the previous chapter, and then you learn new stuff too. All right? So you should know that when we talk about a web browser, that literally is referred to as the client. When we talk about a web server, that's the server. Don't worry about client server. That term is not as in vogue as it used to be. All right? Like I told you, you don't have to worry anymore. You won't be asked anymore what a local area network is, what a wide area network is, what an internet is, what an intranet is, etc. You won't be asked that stuff. All right? We will go back in later classes and we'll look at HTTP requests and HTTP response. But for now, you don't have to worry about it. We talked about the difference between a static web page, and a static web page is one that ends with .html. The idea is I can come out there today and I can come out there again next week and it'll probably look the same. And if for a static web page, typically what I have to do is if I want to make changes to it, I have to take the site down, make the changes, and put the site back up again. All right? With dynamic web pages, there's more involved. There's JavaScript. There may be other languages involved. And again, I gave you the example. That's like if you go out to some websites and you go down to the bottom of the page, it might say, you are the 7,044th visitor to this site. If you go there a couple days later, it might say, you are the 8,000th visitor to this site. So it has changed over time. All right, it could be a lot more changes, but that's an example. All right, we will be talking about JavaScript later on in the course. Again, that's the last half of the course. We talk about JavaScript and jQuery, which is a JavaScript library. All right, for now, we're talking about HTML and CSS. All right, we talked about this before. HTML allows you to put the content, your page content in. CSS, cascading style sheets, that's used to pretty up or whatever you want to say, the content that you put in. All right? All right. The text editor that we're using is Atom. Again, if you don't like the fact that I'm using Atom and you want to use brackets or you want to use Eclipse or you want to use Notepad++ or something else, that's always your individual call. All right. We'll talk more as we go on in the class about FTP, the File Transfer Protocol. And again, you will have a chance to actually use FileZilla this semester. All right. You know how to view a page on the internet. You know what the address bar is in your browser, etc. So I don't think there's any more. We have to talk anymore about that. And again, the stuff that's discussed here on the bottom, I'm not going to read them. These 5 critical issues will be discussed. For instance, I think Chapter 5 or Chapter 6 is all on responsive web design. So many of these chapters will be, we will talk about them again and again as we go on. All right, so let's do this. 3, back up again. As far as the material that was in Chapter 2, hopefully you are okay with that doc type designation. Again, that's what's in the angle brackets, the less than and greater than sign, exclamation point, doc type, HTML. If you have just that in there, that is letting the system know that that is an HTML5 document. All right? The root element or the thing at the top, that's that HTML tag. Everything that you put in a web page is between the beginning HTML tag and the ending HTML tag. The beginning HTML tag typically is an example of where you put an attribute. What attribute? Lang. Lang equal double quote en double quote. So the attribute is the language you're using. The value of that attribute is en for English. All right? You know how to create HTML comments. And again, they are shown right here. There's the beginning HTML comment, a less than sign, an exclamation point, and a minus minus. There's the ending, a minus minus and a greater than sign. All right? Whitespace, as far as the browser is concerned, it treats you hitting the enter key yourself manually, all right, is the same as if you hit a space bar. So a tab, hitting the space bar, or hitting the enter key are all just designed to give you a single character. If I want hitting the space bar, if I want to simulate that, I put in a BR tag. That's a line break. If I physically want a bunch of blank spaces, I mentioned this the other day, you put ampersand NBSP with a semicolon. That stands for non-breaking space. All right, we'll get to that and actually start talking about that, I believe, today.
Somebody come like take our attendance or anything?
Did Mr. Not show?
No, I thought you knew about this.
Oh, I didn't know that was today. Okay, hold on.
Sorry.
All right then, to finish this up, okay, Chapter 3 and 4, especially Chapter 4, are going to be very CSS specific. All right? So CSS Style Rules, if you don't get them, you should after going over these 2 chapters. All right? So we'll talk about style rules, we'll talk about declarations, we'll talk about comments that you make in there. There won't be anything new as far as that goes. Also, by now, you should be familiar. So if you're told on your next test to validate your CSS files and to validate your HTML files, you should know how to do it. All right? Any questions on any of that stuff from chapters 1 or 2? All right, then let's jump into Chapter 3. And Chapter 3 in your book starts on page 85. Notice it's called How to use HTML to structure a web page. Again, this chapter is more HTML intensive. The next chapter is more CSS intensive. I can tell you that there's probably something in this chapter that's important that I will miss during this lecture. Not on purpose, but there'll just be a point or two or three or whatever that I probably should have gone over and have missed. That's why it's very important that you at least page through this stuff and take a look at it. And if you have questions, or if there's something you're like, we didn't go over that in class, then ask. All right? Because literally any information that's shown here and that's in the chapter, really in chapters 1, 2, 3, or 4, is fair game for your next test. Does that make sense to everyone? And when you take your next test next Monday, all right, we're not doing it together. You're going to be taking your test. All right? So we talk about the head section. Now, I've talked a little bit about the head, and I mentioned that that's what goes up in the tab, when you put in your title, etc. But they're going to talk about other things the title is used for, all right, that we haven't gotten into yet. How to code text elements. Some of these you've seen. Some of these you have not seen. All right? All right. How to structure the content of a page. Yes?
Then you said we don't have class on Monday, right?
Oh, you're right. It'll be Tuesday. But how to structure the content of a page, this is the first time they're going to go into those actual HTML5 tags. All right? How to code links, lists, and images. Guess what? Again, we've done all that already. You've looked at the A tag. I showed you how to use it. You looked at lists. We looked at ordered lists. We looked at unordered lists. We even looked at definition lists or data lists. And we looked at images. Is there more, more to them? A little bit, but we've covered most of it. All right. And then finally, what they do in most of the chapters in this section where it says a structured web page, what the author shows you there is the example for this San Joaquin town hall that they're building throughout the book here. All right. And they show you that, and they say kind of this is what we've learned so far in here type of thing. All right. All right. Again, talking to some of you separately, all right, it's, again, I hear what you're saying, and with some of you, you're like, yeah, I really like this book. Some of the rest of you is, I don't like this book at all. And, guess what? I get it. All right? All right. Now, if I make that big, I get these. So that's not what I want. Let's see. 207. In case you don't know this, or I haven't said it to you, I hate VitalSource. This is what I'm using in here. They used to just send me PDFs, and it was so much easier to get through it. The problem was that what a lot of instructors were doing is they were giving the PDFs to their students. Then students weren't buying the books, and that's why they went to this. So, all right. So how to code the head section. Again, the title and a favicon. Let's take a look at both of these. All right. So, make it a little bit bigger. Not that big. All right. All right. What's that? Yes, it is going on YouTube. Yes, I'm taping it right now. So this is your head section. Now, that's not everything you can put in there. If you're having a hard time seeing it, then hopefully you have your own textbook with you, and you are on page 87 right now. All right? But they've got here title, San Joaquin Valley Town Hall with a bar there, speakers and luncheons. You already know it doesn't show you all that up here. All right? Because you only have a limited amount. What you may know, what you may not know, is this thing that you see here and here and here and here. Those are called favicons. You will be creating a favicon, all right, in this chapter. Is it hard? You have to go out to a website, all right? You go out to a website and you give it an image you have, you click a button, and it creates the favicon for you. It also, when it does that, it creates the favicon at many different sizes. This, I think, is about a 16 by 16 right there. But you can make them bigger, put bigger ones in there if you want to. All right, now, notice SEO. Remember what SEO stands for? Anybody? Search Engine Optimization. So what they're saying there is their guidelines always code a title tag in the head section. In other words, don't put, head title, leave it blank, title. Don't do that. Or don't leave it out altogether. All right? The title should accurately describe the page's content. All right? So what some people do is they just, if you don't change it, remember, with what we're using, it comes up as document. It's not a very good title. All right? Now, what they say is it should include at least one or two keywords that are used, because the search engine may use what's in the title to help with your page ranking. All right? So, for example, I gave you that if I'm going to, go up against Dick's, I might want to have my homepage say Jeff Sporting Goods, and then something like a bar like that, homepage. Then it at least knows what it is this particular thing is about. All right. The title should be interesting enough to entice the reader to click on it. Yeah, well, whatever. All right. The title should be unique for each page in the website. That's one thing I'm going to be looking for. So, for instance, when the test you just did, your title should have had in there someplace home, all right, or index, but really it's typically called home, resume, coursework, contact, etc. All right. Limit the length of your title to around 65 characters, because that's typically all the search engine's going to look for anyway. All right. Again, I don't want to sit and read this stuff to you. Okay? As far as the favicon goes, notice again, link, rel equals shortcut space icon. There are different ways that you can do this. If you look up, if you go out to W3 schools and you look up favicon, they may show you a different way than the way that's shown here. All right? href equals, typically you take that particular file and you put it in your images folder. So for us, it'll be images/favicon.ico, something like that. You'll see it. We'll get a chance to do this as a class in a little bit. All right, so don't let that, if you're like, well, I don't get that, don't let that throw you. All right, how to include metadata. What I want you to look at for this, okay, notice what it says here. All right, it says there's a character set, there's a name, and there's content. We talked about the character set already. They're not even showing it here. You may remember where it said meta char set equals UTF-8. And I mentioned that you're using the Unicode character set. All right. There's also name and there's content. Notice what it says here. This is the meta tag you use for a description. But when you do that, name equal description. That means that what follows is going to be a description. Name equal keywords. Those are the keywords that you're using. Then it's content equal. And then in double quotes, you put in the description or content equal, and that's where you put in the keywords. All right? Do you have to do that? There's a lot of disagreement over how much search engines still use these today. All right? You can go out and search the web and find different articles on this. Let me tell you about how people abuse these things. All right? And you may or may not believe this, but I went out and saw this. After 9/11, because that's coming up, after 9/11 back, 17 years ago, there were a lot of places that were putting 9/11 in as their keywords. I mean, you might find it at a sporting goods site, which had nothing to do with 9/11. Sorry. But people were doing that, thinking that by doing that, that was going to make the search engine raise their rankings. All right? So there's a right way to do things and a right thing to do and a wrong thing to do. That was a wrong thing to do. The idea with the description is it's giving the search engine an idea of what the site is about. And what's that?
Is that illegal?
Was it what they did? No, because there was no laws on that. All right. I mean, you can put false stuff in here, but typically what happens is the search engine, so be it Yahoo, Bing, Google, whatever it happens to be, it goes through your entire website. It's called spidering the website. And it goes through there and it makes sure, for example, that basically it keeps information to see, is that really what the content, is that really what the website is about, what you put in the description. Are you actually using these keywords throughout? All right, that's the way that those are used. All right, and again, there's some SEO guidelines. I'll let you take a look at those yourselves. If we spend too much time on each page, we'll never get done with this. All right, I'm just trying to hit the high points with you. And my hope is that you'll take the time to read through the chapters yourselves. And if there's something that you don't think I covered sufficiently or that you don't think I covered at all, then you will let me know. That's the other thing about that. This will occasionally just do that. It'll just boop, and it's not even there anymore. All right, how to code text elements. Some of these we've looked at. Everybody knows this by now, right? With those H1 through H6, which is the biggest? H1, which means that H6 is the smallest. All right? P is used for a paragraph tag. I have a tendency that when I have my paragraph tags, I'll have my P tag, then I'll indent, put all of my text, and then put another P. You don't have to do that. Even if you've got something that runs for thousands of characters, you can just keep typing if you want to. If I did that, it would be very hard for you to see it on the screen. That's why I don't do that. All right? I like it. To me, it gives it a little bit more structure doing it like this. Not everyone agrees with that. So they show you some, and this is one of the reasons I like these books. They show you an H1 and H2 in a paragraph, an H2 in a paragraph. There's the H1, there's the H2, there's the paragraph, there's the H2, and I guess there's another paragraph there. All right, but it shows you what it should look like on a page. All right. Now, SEO guidelines, the key one in here is typically you should only have one H1 tag on each page. That's what's considered the best way of doing it. And it should be either at the top or very close to the top. All right. And even with that, what some people I've seen them do is when you get around an H4 tag, that's usually about the same. It's usually about the same size text as if you were typing regular text. The difference is it'll be bolded. So you should only use these tags if indeed you're breaking up your page, all right, into sections or whatever. Now, I almost jumped by this, but I want to make sure you hear these two lines. One is inline, and one is block. All right? And I want you to understand the difference between these. If I come in and type in this, P, hello world, P, and this is my web page. The P tag is an example of a block tag. A block tag automatically will put a blank line before whatever it shows and a blank line after it. It's in its own block. So this will be a blank line here, hello world, and another blank line here. Does that make sense? All right. Examples of block tags are a paragraph tag, a div tag, an H1 through H6 tag, and there's others. But those are examples. All right. Now, on the other hand, with an inline tag, they do not have a blank space in between each one. So if I wanted to take hello there and bold it, remember we talked about there's two ways of bolding it. You can use the B tag, which is you shouldn't be using anymore, or the strong tag. You know that that's going to take that hello, and I can't really show it on here, but it's going to bold it, right? That is an inline tag. It does not give you a blank line before it and afterwards. It's inline. So usually inline tags are inside of block tags. All right. Examples of inline tags, I've already shown you one, strong or the B tag, emphasis or the I tag, and there are other ones. But it's important that you understand the difference between a block tag and an inline tag. One reason that that's important is when we do this, and you've already seen this, but when we come in here, so if this is my page and I say UL, and I've got here LI, let's just call them line item 1, LI. I'm going to put 3 of them in here, and there's a reason I'm doing this. 2, LI. LI is just line item. So it's got line item 1, 2, and 3. On my page, it's going to look like what? LI1, LI2, and LI3. Correct? You've already seen this. And it's doing that because the UL, by default, is a block level tag. What we're going to want to do, though, eventually, is turn that off. So we'll want it, instead of telling it to display block, we'll tell it to display inline. And then that'll look like, after we do that, the LI2 will go here, and the LI3 will go here. Why is that important? Because when you start to set up your navigation, what's in vogue today is to run it horizontally as opposed to vertically. All right? We'll be doing that, and we'll be doing that fairly quick, fairly soon. Now, how to code special blocks of text. All right? Again, if I go in there and I type in this, so if I come in with a paragraph and I type in, for whatever reason, J, and I hit the enter key, E, F, and I hit the enter key, F, I don't know why I do that, but if I did, it would go in there as J with a space, EF with a space, and F. I don't know why I would do that, but let's just say I did. On the other hand, instead of a paragraph tag, if I put in there pre, as it says here, used for portions that are formatted with line breaks and spaces, it's going to look exactly like this. So if you want to force something to look in a certain way, you don't put it in a paragraph tag, you put it in a pre tag, which, for lack of better words, I think they say it here means pre-formatted. Yes?
So this is basically like a paragraph tag?
It's treated like one, but it's saying for line breaks, etc., treat them exactly as shown. All right? Now the block quote we went over. We don't have to do that again, correct? All right? You're going to see that again even in the next assignment that we do. There's also an address tag. That's a newer HTML5 tag, but the idea, typically what an address tag does is it takes what you have and it italicizes it. All right? But it's putting it in there as a unit. What we're going to talk about a little bit later today, I don't know if it's in chapter 3 or 4, I think it's in this chapter, are some of the newer HTML5 elements. I had you put a couple of those on your test, and those being header, nav, and footer. All right? These elements, these HTML5 elements, a lot of times you'll see in books, instead of being called HTML5 elements, they're called HTML5 semantic elements. And what semantic means is when you look at the tag, you can kind of understand how it's being used. All right? So you know looking at a header, that's header information. You know looking at a footer, that's footer information. So who cares? It used to be people would do this. They would say div ID equal header, or div ID equal nav, or div ID equal footer. All right, so what is this by versus this? Well, when people got lazy, they would just make it a div and they wouldn't put an ID there. Now, by using the header tag, it's pretty obvious by looking at it what its usage is. That kind of an idea. And I don't want to confuse you, because I find this confusing. You can have more than one header on a single page. You can have more than one footer on a single page. You can even have a footer at the top of a page, which to me seems counterintuitive. When I think footer, I think bottom. But you can do that. And if you raise your hand and say, why would you want to do that? I can't give you a reason. The point is, you can do it if you want to or deem that you need to. All right. Some other things that you can put in here: subscript, superscript. You know, subscript. So if I said hello and I wanted to put a number 1 down there, I could use a subscript. Okay? If I said hello and wanted to put a number 1 up here, I could use a superscript. And you'll see examples as I move this down. The BR tag, we all get that, correct? It's just a line break, right? All right. Some of the other stuff that's in here: abbreviations, citing, code. What code typically will do is it's for computer code. It'll make it monospaced. And what that means is it'll look pretty ugly on the page. All right, kind of like the way old-fashioned code did when you put it in. The rest of those you can see if you take a look in here. Some of these we've covered already. All right, but I already told you that one thing that you can do is you can type in HTML5 tag list into Google, and the first thing that'll come up is W3 Schools tag list, and it'll show you every one of these, and it'll show you an example of each one. So again, they show you some of these on here, but they don't show you every single one. All right? And they talk about inline and they talk about block level here. I already have with you. The next thing is character entities. If you look at your keyboard right now, if all of you look at your keyboard, you'll notice there's certain things that are not on there. For instance, when you type and you want to say x equals 7 divided by 2, you type it like that. But if you remember back from grade school, you did something like this. But that key, that minus sign with a dot above it and a dot below, is not on your keyboard. But there is an HTML character entity that if you wanted to put that in, you could. If you wanted to say that something cost 37 cents, there is no cents key on your keyboard, but there is an HTML entity for cents. The ones that you will use most often, all right, most of them are shown here, but the one that I use most often is this one, because that puts the copyright symbol on your page. You may have an instance to use several of the ones that are on here. All right. Does it make sense to you that if I do this, let's just say, and don't ask me why I'd want to type this, but if I put in a paragraph that says, I love the H1 tag, all right? The system doesn't know. It thinks that H1 right there, I'm going to go add a brand new block level tag that's H1 that says tag with an exclamation point. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. But if I actually want to say this, and I want it to look like this, I can say, I love the, and then I could say ampersand LT, which is a less than sign, H1 ampersand GT tag. That, putting that in with an LT and a GT, that will do this. All right. So if you are writing up something on your own on a website that's talking about tags, for example, that's one way to do it. All right. Those again are character entities. Again, if you go in and you key in character entities or HTML character entities, there are probably a couple hundred of them. All right. But they'll give you a whole list. And I'm showing you there's even other ways that you can do them other than what I'm showing you. I'm showing you the most common way of doing it. All right? core attributes. Now it's going to start being important that you understand the difference between those two things. All right? And if I'm going to set up a web page, and I know on every single web page, all right, I work for a company, it's the rule, it's the law in the company. There will be one header on each page and one footer on each page. That cannot change. Are you with me? That's just a rule. You cannot violate it for any reason. Then I could say, you know, let's just say that I call it something. Then I would probably use a pound sign because there's one on each page. If, on the other hand, I'm going to allow there to be multiple ones on each page, I would use that. That's not a great example, but what it is saying in there is with an ID, IDs are designed so that there's only one of those things that you are listing by ID on a page. All right? With classes, you can use them all over. That's the other thing is if I create a class, I can use that class on a paragraph. I can use it on an H1. I can use it on an ordered list. I can use it on an unordered list, etc. So there's more versatility in using classes than there is in using IDs. And I think I even mentioned this to you on the first day. I know web developers that the only thing they will use is classes. They don't think there's a reason to ever use an ID. All right. And again, they come in here and they show you some examples of using these things. All right. Notice under the accessibility guideline, it says always use that language attribute. You may or may not remember that when we put that in, when we put in that attribute, all right, or when we left it out and we went back to go in and validate, we got a warning, all right, because it was looking for the language attribute, all right. Now, here, did I skip that? I want to make sure I did. All right, if you look up on the screen here, we've got header, we've got main, section, article, nav, aside, and footer. If we, for lack of better words, if I'd say the bad thing about this, all right, you can go online, you can go out to W3 schools, they'll give you guidelines on how to use these. Okay, just so you know. I kind of look at them as, for lack of better words, as being like a newspaper. All right, I'm dating myself because there aren't a whole heck of a lot of newspapers around anymore. But if I grab my section of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, let's say. So up here it says St. Louis Post-Dispatch. That would be the header. That makes sense? All right. Down on the bottom I might have, you know, published by, and then some other information. That would be the footer. Okay? Everything in between that header and footer, all this stuff, that, for lack of better words, is main. All right? So what's left? Section, article, nav. Well, if we have a thing, again, they don't typically have it exactly that way on the front, but if it said here, for example, news, part 1, sports, part 2, etc. If we have something like that, that would be our nav. Okay? Well, a page on here is going to be filled with articles. So let's say, I don't know if you saw that there was a bus crash yesterday, all right, where a bus literally was hit by an 18-wheeler, all right, and 7 people died or something like that. So if I had that, that might be one of my articles, all right? It may or it may not. But sometimes, if maybe you've seen this, you got an article here. Then over here on the side, they've got local girl killed. So maybe she was one of the people on there. You know what I'm talking about? Does that make sense to everybody? That's an aside. That's something you really don't need for the page, but you just put it there for extra information. All right? So that's that. And the only thing that's left is section. Well, what some people do is they take their page like this, and instead of having it like I showed you, they break it up into different sections. And those sections can contain their own articles and their own asides. The bad thing is there are other people who believe, no, these shouldn't be sections with articles, etc. These should be articles. So it's not illegal for you to put sections inside of articles. Where to me it makes more sense to put articles inside of sections. But that's the bad thing. There is no 100% agreement on how all this stuff should be done. So again, that was an introduction to the main portions, but I would strongly suggest that you go out to W3 schools and take a look where they explain these elements in more detail. I'm sure much better than I just did. All right, some other things. Time. As it says, a date or time that can be parsed by a browser. That's different than you typing in 9:59 or 10 o'clock a.m. 8/31/2018. When you use time, the browser actually has a better idea that, oh, that isn't just some string of characters. That's an actual time, or that's an actual date. All right. Figure and fig caption. We haven't done this yet, but normally when you are putting in an image, all right, a lot of times that image will be inside of a figure tag. Then you'll have your image, and then you might have your figure caption that goes along with it. All right. All right. The next thing I would suggest, again, because I'm going to explain this right now, but am I going to do a good job? I'm going to do a job. Whether or not it's a good job is something you're going to have to figure out. But on page 104 of your text, there is a thing on page 104 that says when and how to use divs and spans. All right? And it's an important distinction, and it's important that you understand it. A div is short for division. All right? It's an area. It's something. You can take your whole web page, going back, Abby, you had asked about that wrapper. We said div ID equal wrapper, and we put almost the whole page in there. That just said that whole thing. Why do you do that? Because if I go back and I go into my CSS and I say # wrapper, anything I put in there is going to be be reflected on everything that's in the div. So a div can be more than one line, and a div is a block level tag. Blank line before it, blank line after it. A span is an inline tag. So you can put a span, you already saw this. Remember I gave you the example on the first day, you're writing a little kid story, once upon a time, you make that O really big. You could use a span, if you wanted to, with a style tag just for that letter O. So a div is a block level tag. A span is an inline tag. There's more to it than that, but that's pretty much what they're talking about in here. All right. Does everyone understand, if you look up on the screen here, we're going to finish the chapter and then we'll take a break. Do you understand the concept of an absolute URL? 99.9999 times out of 100, an absolute URL will start with one of three things. HTTP:// HTTPS:// or FTP://. One of those. It's absolute, so it's starting from the beginning. A relative URL starts from where you are. All right? And notice it typically says ... or something like that. ... means go up one level from where you are. Guess what? You've already used relative URLs. And you've worked, and if you say, no, I haven't, yes, you have. How about your images? We say images / in the name of your image. That's a relative URL. You're not starting that with an HTTP or an HTTPS or an FTP. You're starting it based off of where you currently are. And that's what they're talking about in here. How to code links. We've talked somewhat about these. You should know now. Hopefully you're developing a comfort level with href, you can put in there, you can put a complete URL. You saw me do that. When I put in a bracket a href equal and I said https://rankin.edu. That is, all right, that is not a relative URL, that's an absolute URL. Right? If I want to jump to someplace in my own, right here, if I want to jump to someplace on my own website, I can use ... or whatever. That is a relative. Absolute, again, starting with one of those three things, relative compared to where you currently are. All right. UL, OL, LI. What's the difference again between a UL and an OL? What? Yeah, an OL ordered list. So it must start with a 1 or an I lowercase or an I uppercase or an A lowercase or an A uppercase by default. All right. An unordered list, the UL typically will have either a filled in circle, a circle that's not filled in, or a square. Now you can change all those things with CSS. So if I want to create an unordered list, I want stars by them, I can do that. Yes. Okay. Yeah, you could do that. All right. We will talk about that, just not right now. But there's an unordered list. You see it with the dots. There's an ordered list, and you see it with the numbers. All right. How to include images. Again, we've talked about this. I have mentioned all 4 of these things. You must put a source in there. That's the image. All right. You must put an alt in there, which gives you the alternate text in case A, you put a wrong source in, or B, you've got someone who's challenged and doesn't have what's called a, quote, typical browser, unquote. All right. The height and width are not mandatory, but again, if you put them in, you are making it easier for the system to know what it is, how much space to put aside. All right. The other thing, please look up on the screen here. JPEG, Jiff, and Ping. All right. JPEGs, typically, JPEGs are used for photographs. They have the best quality. They're also the ones that when you try to change them, make them smaller, etc., a lot of times they look not as professional. All right. There's even one here, the next one that's here is a Jiff. All right. Graphical interchange format. All right. Typically, GIFs are going to be used for logos. All right. So, for the thing you saw with Rankin, that could have very well been a GIF. All right. Then you've got pings. And I don't want to go through the story with you, but pings are meant to be kind of a cross between GIFs and JPEGs. They're designed to give you the best of both worlds. All right. It says see chapters 4 and 11 for more, more information on coding. So again, we'll see it again. The rest of this chapter is they've got this San Joaquin page, the one that's right here. Now you should be able to look at this and say, well, we've got some kind of a logo there, some kind of a heading, some kind of a heading, some kind of a heading, some kind of an unordered list, probably a paragraph, and probably a footer. That makes sense? So they show you then, after that, they show you the HTML. They give you all of the HTML right there. And then they say, well, to make it actually look nice, we would need the CSS too. All right, there's not much CSS. I guess there's probably none in here. We will add that in the next chapter. All right, so as it says, this chapter presented many of the HTML elements. You should now have an understanding of the difference between a block element and an inline element. Again, block elements have a line before them and a line after them. Div is an example, paragraph is an example, your H1, etc., H2, all those are all block level. Inlines are usually inside of block levels. All right, so span is a good example of an inline, where div is an example of a block level element. Character entities, I mentioned a few of them, like using the less than and greater than sign. All All right, the copyright you can use. There's a one for trademark, etc. We started looking at the HTML semantic elements here. All right. It says historically the div was used. The funny thing is, if you would please, just take a second, all of you, and just read that line, or those 3 lines that are in blue. Okay. Over time, they have changed the text that goes in there. Because it used to say, historically, the div element has been used to divide the code for a document into divisions, and the span has been used to identify portions of text so formatting can be applied to them. Then it said afterwards, divs are not used so much anymore. But that's not true. Because Bootstrap, that we'll talk about in the weeks to come, it's all div driven. Everything you do inside of divs. It's like, I'll always remember this. Years ago, I was throwing out a tie. And my wife said, what are you doing? I said, I'm throwing out this tie. She said, why? What's wrong with it? I said, nothing. It's a thin tie. They're not in style anymore. She said, keep it. It'll come back in style. And that's the way a lot of this stuff is. People will think, well, we're not going to use this. All right? But then it comes back. That's what happened to HTML. It went out of style. It came back in style. You should know the difference between an absolute URL and a relative URL. You should understand how to use the A tag, how to do an ordered list and an unordered list, and how to set up an image. All right? So before we go on, which we will in just a couple minutes, we will go into Chapter 4, but it's 10:10. All right? Let's take 15 again and come back, please, at 10:25. It's okay. Please don't ever apologize.
So whenever I did mine, I just Googled like how to center text, and it brought up align center,
Yes.
and that's what I did.
Well, if it's text, you usually will say text-align, center.
Okay, and I just put that in the HTML. Is that something I should put
Well,
in?
if you put it in the HTML, then what you're doing is you're mixing
Okay.
your HTML with your CSS, which isn't considered to be a good idea.
Okay.
Let's pretend that you wanted everything on the page to be centered, no matter what it was.
Okay.
We talked about that margin auto, but let's say you didn't learn that.
Yeah.
You could come into the body, and you could put inside of the body text-align center, which is telling it to try to take every bit of text that's in there
Okay.
and center it.
Okay. So it's just div ID wrapper is
Yes.
what you would use,
And then, like, if you wanted everything in the wrapper, then you would say pound wrapper, and then you'd have your curly brace, and then you'd say, like, text-align center, semicolon, and your curly brace.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Again, you're going to be doing that more and more as we go on. If it doesn't totally make sense, you'll have plenty of time to practice it.